morning.
Fully covered.
Thank you for coming and for accepting to be here with a short notice. We all know what is happening in the country with regards to our power sector, and the minority would like to make a few statements in response to the Energy Minister's presser yesterday. I must state plainly and without qualification, Ghana's power crisis, the Dumsor that millions of Ghanaians have been enduring since January 2025, was not caused by any accident at Akosombo. It was caused by this government. The event of 23rd April are the latest and most dramatic symptom of a power sector left to decay under the NDC's incompetent stewardship. The Mahama government must not be permitted to use this incident as a convenient alibi for a crisis that predates it by more than a year. And the MPP minority will not allow that cynical rewriting of history to pass unchallenged. Let us be unequivocal about the timeline. Long before the event of 23rd April 2026, Ghanaians across every region of this country had been enduring persistent, unannounced, and devastating power outages. ECG had been issuing relentless emergency and maintenance schedules throughout April 2026. The ECG Director General had already issued public apologies for chronic power fluctuations, causing damage to household equipment and crippling small businesses. Communities were living in darkness, not for hours, but for days. Industries were hemorrhaging losses. Cold stores were warming. Hospitals were straining on generators. That was the reality of Ghana's power sector before any incident at Akosombo. That is the crisis this government owns, fully, entirely, and without excuse. On 19th April 2026, 4 days before the Akosombo incident, President Mahama stood before the Ghanaian people and declared, "The outages you are facing are not Dumsor." He described the disruptions as necessary steps to ensure a more reliable and stable power supply. The Ghanaian people did not believe him then. They do not believe him now. And the NPP minority will not allow this government to shelter its own incompetence behind the narrative of a single incident. We say to the president directly, the darkness Ghanaians are experiencing is not the product of 23rd April 2026. It is the product of 14 months of policy failure, institutional neglects, and the deliberate abandonment of the energy sector recovery framework that the Nana Addo Akufo-Addo and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia administration put in place to prevent exactly this kind of collapse. The government of President Akufo-Addo and Vice President Bawumia did not leave behind a broken sector without solutions. They left behind the Energy Sector Recovery Program, which we call the ESRP, a comprehensive, internationally agreed framework designed to address the financial and operational vulnerabilities of Ghana's electricity sector. The ESRP had been negotiated with the IMF as a structural benchmark under Ghana's extended credit facility. It had specific timelines, specific targets, and specific commitments. It was not a wish list. It was a working plan, agreed with international partners and designed to be implemented with urgency. The IMF had projected Ghana's energy sector financial shortfall at $2.2 billion and had explicitly identified the ESRP as the mechanism for preventing supply disruptions. The government's own finance minister has acknowledged that cumulative sector shortfalls could exceed $9 billion by 2026 without immediate reforms. Independent power producers' obligations remained outstanding. revenue collection failures at ECG, with distribution losses exceeding 25% of electricity generated, had been documented, flagged, and handed to this government with a clear prescription for resolution. What did the Mahama government do with this inheritance? It delayed, it diluted, it rebadged the crisis as a maintenance program. It renamed Dumsor as upgrades, and it presided month after month over the financial strangulation of the very infrastructure upon which millions of Ghanaians depend. The question every Ghanaian must ask is a simple one. If the lights were on when the NPP handed over power, and the lights are off now, who turned them off? Ghana's installed generation capacity stands at over 5,200 megawatts, against a peak demand of approximately 4,300 megawatts. On paper, we have more than sufficient generation capacity to keep the light on. The crisis has never been about how much power we can generate. It has always been financial, managerial, and infrastructural failure, one that the ESRP was designed to solve, one that the NPP government was actively addressing, and one that this NDC government has allowed to worsen through incompetence and willful neglect. Scapegoating officials. The decision to ask the GRIDCO CEO to step aside and to reshuffle ECG's Ashanti regional leadership may generate headlines. It will not generate electricity. The MPP minority puts it squarely to this government. What Ghana is witnessing is not accountability. It is the political management and embarrassment by an administration caught off guard by the consequences of its own inactions. Engineer Mark Ewuaba was appointed acting CEO of GRIDCO in 2025 by this very administration. The financial environment within which GRIDCO has been forced to operate since January 2025, one of chronic underfunding, uncleared IPP obligations, deferred maintenance, and a sector hemorrhaging cash under NDC stewardship, is not of his making. It is the making of his political principles. To hold him publicly accountable while shielding the policy architects of this disaster is not justice. It is deflection dressed up as decisive leadership. Even with the fire outbreak at Akosombo, the government has a responsibility to protect our national energy infrastructure backbone, the transmission network. However, lack of maintenance and safety protocols must be blamed on the government. We do not oppose investigation. Any inquiry into events at critical national infrastructure must be thorough and transparent. If negligence, dereliction of duty, or any other culpable conduct is found, those responsible must face the full force of the law. But investigation must precede conclusion, and the suspension of officials must not serve as a press release substitute for a genuine reckoning with the policy failures that has brought Ghana's energy sector to its knees. If any official is to face scrutiny, let that same scrutiny fall on the energy minister and on this president. For it is their ministry, their policy choices, and their disdain for the ESRP that created the conditions under which critical national infrastructure has been allowed to deteriorate. The GRIDCO CEO did not delay the ESRP. The ECG Ashanti management did not accumulate or refuse to clear the IPP payment backlog. The government did. Every outage Ghanaians suffer is not an abstraction. It is a factory that has stopped production, a cold store that has warmed and destroyed its inventory, a hospital ward running on a generator with uncertain fuel, a student who cannot study, a small business that has shuttered for another day, a family that has gone to bed in the dark again, and the wounded and wondered when their government will tell them the truth. We recall with horror the human cost of the NDC's Dumsor during President Mahama's first term. Oxygen-dependent deliveries interrupted. Life-saving surgeries catastrophically disrupted when power was cut. Industries crippled. agriculture devastated. The Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research documented losses of at least $618 million in 2014 alone. We do not raise these figures to relitigate the past. We raise them because this is the same government, the same president, presiding over the same crisis with the same excuses and the same contempt for the suffering of the Ghanaian people. In 2015, President Mahama himself acknowledged to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel that he had been nicknamed Mr. Dumsor. He did not deny the crisis then. He cannot deny it now. The name has returned with its owner. The One Ghana Cedi Dumsor levy. Ghanaians will recall that a special levy of 1 Ghana Cedi per litre was imposed on fuel, expressly presented to the public as a dedicated mechanism to address the energy crisis. Citizens were asked to bear this additional financial burden at the pump, on top of the already crippling cost of living, with the assurance that the funds would be channeled directly into fixing the power sector. Ghanaians, as they so often do, complied. Yet, to this day, no report on this levy has been presented to Parliament. No public accounting has been made. No independent audit has been published. The Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance have remained conspicuously silent on what should be a matter of the most basic public accountability. How much revenue has been collected under this levy since its introduction? Into which account or accounts have the funds been paid? What specific projects, interventions, or payments have been made from the funds collected? What is the current balance, if any, of the levy fund? These are questions that any responsible government must be able to answer without hesitation. We also know that the problems of the sector is not only technical, it is financial. The Ministry of Finance announced last year that it had cleared all the debts to IPPs. The government also credited itself with financial improvements at ECG. However, the data available to us is that government owes IPPs over $500 million and over $200 million to companies that supplied fuel for power generation. We call on the government to come clear on the financial situation in the sector, particularly after the imposition of the Dumsor levy. We are calling on the Minister for Energy and the Minister for Finance to, within the shortest possible time, lay before Parliament upon resumption and publish for the consumption of all Ghanaians a full, detailed and independently verified report on the 1 Ghana Cedi Dumsor levy, covering all collections made to date, all disbursements, and the outcomes of every expenditure. If the levy has been collected but not properly applied, Ghanaians have the right to know. If it has been misappropriated, those responsible must be held accountable. We will not let this matter rest. Let me add that the Honorable Habib, First Deputy Minority Whip, will be filing an RTI on the energy sector levy. How much has been realized and what has been used for when we are still experiencing Dumsor. What the government must do immediately: stop the semantic deception. The government must immediately cease describing a nationwide power crisis as a planned maintenance program or a series of routine transformer upgrades. Ghanaians are not fooled. The lights are out because this government failed to implement the recovery plan it inherited, not because of engineering schedules. Implement the ESRP without further delay. The energy sector recovery program must be fully and faithfully implemented, with a public implementation timeline verified by independent parties. Every further week of delay deepens the financial deterioration that is producing the operational failures Ghanaians are experiencing. There is no credible alternative. Clear outstanding IPP obligations immediately. Independent power producers cannot sustain capacity under conditions of chronic payment default. The government must publish the full quantum of outstanding IPP obligations and provide a binding publicly available payment schedule with credible external verification. commission and publish a national infrastructure safety audit. Ghanaians own this infrastructure. They are entitled to know the current maintenance and operational status of every critical node in Ghana's transmission and distribution network. If other substations, switch yards, and control facilities are in a state of despair caused by financial neglect, Parliament and the public must know. Appear before Parliament without delay. The Minister of Energy must appear before the full House and brief members on the current state of Ghana's generation and transmission capacity, the financial obligations outstanding to IPPs, the status of the ESRP, and this government's credible, costed, and time-bound plan to end Dumsor. Parliament oversight mandate is not optional. It is constitutional. Ensure due process for suspended officials. An investigation of BidCo CEO or ECG's Ashanti leadership must follow transparent due process. Findings must be evidence-based. If culpability is established, the law must take its course. If it is not, those officials must be fully and publicly exonerated. This government must not sacrifice public servants on the altar of political optics, while its own ministers escape accountability. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, Ghana cannot afford a government that manages crisis through spectacle. Suspending a CEO, reshuffling a regional management team, and calling a press briefing are not an energy policy. They are a choreography of an administration desperate to be seen acting while refusing to confront the true author of this catastrophe itself. The Dumsor Ghanaians are experiencing today is not the product of any single incident. It is the product of an NDC government that was handed a working recovery plan by the President Akufo-Addo and Dr. Baumia and chose instead to govern by excuses, to manage by misdirection, and to treat a national emergency as a public relations problem to be explained away rather than an energy crisis to be urgently solved. The lights were already going out across Ghana before anything happened at Akosombo. They were going out because this government let the sector decay. They were going out because the ESRP was abandoned. They were going out because IPP obligations went uncleared. Revenue shortfalls went unaddressed. And the minister told Ghanaians the darkness was actually the light of progress. Ghanaians are not living in darkness because of what happened on 23rd April 2026. They are living in darkness because of what this incompetent government has done and catastrophically failed to do every single day since it assumed office in January 2025. The MPP minority will pursue full parliamentary scrutiny of this energy crisis through every constitutional avenue available to us. We will not allow this government to extinguish accountability as easily as it has extinguished the lights of Ghana. We will continue to be the voice of the Ghanaian people in the chamber and in the court of public opinion until this administration is held fully to account for the power crisis it has uttered, deepened, and denied. Thank you very much.
Yeah.